Hello everyone! Welcome to Two's D&D. I am Kay, your host, and I am here with my wonderful co-host, David, aka Full Rubber Ducky. Say hi, David.
Hello, everyone.
So, let's do a quick introduction before we go down. Today's topic is going to be like newbies, newcomers to D&D. I am a very big believer in that newbies in D&D and the TTRPG space are awesome and amazing, and you want them in your games. A lot of people don't understand why they're so good and important. So we're going to spell that. We're going to talk about how to get players ready, or how to get ready as a DM with a new player, but also if you're a new player, like what do you need to know, how can you get ready, all that good stuff. And any questions you have, we are here to answer them. Thank you for joining us tonight. It's always fun to see you all. And I've already got a dab. We've already had a redemption, so there we go. Hello, Steve. Hello, Vivian. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. And I'm Kay. As I said, I'm your host. I work in community management in video games by day, but I nerd out a whole lot about D&D in the after hours. You can find me everywhere at KDamnFear. I stream here Mondays. I do Pokemon. Tuesdays are Tuesday D&D. Sundays, for a while, you can find me in the Mothership RPG miniseries over on Todd Moodbounce's channel, where I am playing Kai, the android. Last episode was a little spicy. It was fun. Some things happened. And I'm excited to announce, David doesn't even know this, next Friday,
Right.
not this Friday, next Friday, at 8 in the Eastern Standard Time, 8 p.m., I am going to be playing in a very special one-shot for Brave Little Toaster. That's right. I don't know which appliance I'm playing yet. I get to make that decision. Yep.
That's it's gonna be a journey. And
I
that's
have
March
been
4th.
Yes, I have been sitting on this all day because I wanted to see David's reaction live captured for the world to see. Did you
Ooh.
expect to be discussing Brave Little Toaster today, David?
No.
But here
yeah,
we are.
Put it in your calendar. Hoo-wee. Zoink Scoob. Zoinks. Brave Little Toaster.
Brave Little Toaster. We're not playing any of the characters from the movie, but it's the movie type setting, and I don't know what Todd's gonna throw at me. So it's gonna be a good time.
Glad to see Todd has been very busy.
Oh yes. David, who are you? Where can we find you? What are you up to?
I am Full Rubber Ducky on Twitter, and on Twitch, and what I am up to is working with Kay, developing a couple of new things that are coming up, including 2 short campaigns that we are going to run shortly, and I'll be helping Kay with casting for these. So if you or anybody else you know wants to play, please drop us a line on Twitter and let us know, or join Kay's Discord server.
Join our Discord.
And talk to us there, and we will see about slotting you into one of our games.
And I just need you to know, David, that the caption said that you are full of a ducky.
I mean, depending on the sort of night I'm having, absolutely.
So, that is what we're up to. But tonight we are discussing newbies in tabletop RPGs. Yes, somewhat specifically D&D, but any tabletop RPG, because we're generally version agnostic here. Though occasionally we do dive into certain rule sets, but I know a lot of people, like I know a disturbing number of DMs and players who like have a very firm like no newbie rule, which I think sucks.
That's silly. Without this further devolving into a whole gatekeeping conversation, why would you want to exclude people who are excited about participating in the thing that you do?
Well, some people have, to an extent, like playing devil's advocate here. I can understand being like, I'm running a stream campaign, or like this campaign is going to be like blah. So I want people who know the rules. I want people who understand the mechanics so we can just like power through and get to the thing. But my experience with tabletops is doesn't matter how well everyone knows the rules. Doesn't matter how much everyone's on the same page about where the game is going. You're gonna wander off the path and into just a little bit of fuckery sooner or later.
Yeah. Excellent point. Everyone was new at some point. And we've all been new as players and new as DMs. So,
what? No, none of us ever decided to do our first DM experience on stream. Who does that?
Right.
Who would do that?
Right. But
it's not on camera for me to review at any time and just relive all the things I did wrong, could have done better. No. It was fine.
I remember reading a post where a guy was like, hey, I designed this world, I designed this plot point, and this villain, and I have a couple of NPCs, and I want to get players in here, but how do I get the players to do what I want them to do? And somebody turned around and said, that's called writing a book,
yeah.
dude.
Yeah.
Like, write a book. So part of, oh my god, hi Jen. Part of what makes Dungeons and Dragons a group activity is the interactiveness of the storytelling, and your players are going to and will throw you a curveball, wander off the beaten path, go in a direction that you didn't anticipate, and that is part of the appeal as a DM of playing D&D with them, is because you get to catch up and scramble and figure out that you can build this new thing together that you wouldn't have built on your own.
And
like
players give you things and twists and ideas that you would never have come up with on your own. And especially, like, look, I only ran a horror campaign, and there were moments where I'm like, and David will confirm, I came up with some truly terrifying things to put in there. But there were moments when I like put something out and the players were like, is it this thing? And like the players made it worse.
Yep, absolutely.
And it's so much fun when they do that. You're like, that's more creative, or that's more terrifying, or that's way more complex and philosophical than I would. Yes, that's exactly. Wow, you read my mind, player.
Yeah, it's like, they'll be like, what, is that a 40-foot spider? And you're like, that was a 20-foot spider. But yes, it is a 40-foot spider.
Can I talk to it?
Yeah, no, but in one of the games that I run, I built an entire new location, gave it political relevance, and that informed and changed the political system for the entire world that I run, because one player wants to own a restaurant. And that gives you a lot of creativity. It adds a lot of depth to your world. It keeps you on your toes. Like, there's just a whole lot of things about it. But when it comes to new players, well, veteran players know how to do that and know how systems work, and they can lead you in that direction on their own, just with their wacky antics. But with new players, it's a different type of derailing you. It's a different type of challenge, because you'll get new players who go, I don't understand how this works, but I want to do blank. And you go, okay, here's how we'll figure out how to make that work.
And you see this a lot with new players want to shoot things in the eye.
Yeah.
And they're like, I'm going to shoot it in the eye. And you're like, that's a called shot. And like, you don't want to have to pause the middle of this. Hi, New York. Thanks for being loud. You don't want to have to pause in the middle of this huge, in your mind cinematic epic battle to be like, okay, so a called shot means this, and like, you don't want to explain the mechanics of it. You're like, so DM tip, ask a new player. If a player, new or old, is trying to do something and you don't understand what's going on, right? Just ask them, what are you trying to do? Because usually they're trying to shoot it in the eye because they want to blind it. And then you can skip a whole called shot and be like, okay, so blinding in D&D really only works with this. You can do this, it's going to be really hard. What if we, and usually that gets you around it. It's pretty great. But what new players are really amazing at, and what they can bring so much joy to, is they don't understand the world as well as we do. They don't understand all the mechanics. They don't know the lore as deeply as we do. And they can either completely misunderstand something in the most glorious of ways, or they can cut to the chase. We're going to have Kato on, and we're going to talk about creative chaos, constructive chaos, and we're going to talk about... I've played... God... 4 out of my last 5 characters have all had 9 intelligence or less.
Yep.
So I've been playing Dumb Direct, and Dumb Direct is really, really fun, but new players can be Dumb Direct even if they're not playing dumb, because I'm going to go, and David, you watched at least this part of Xandria Unlimited with me. Xandria Unlimited, they brought in Amy Carrera, the voice of She-Ra, to play with them. It was her first time playing D&D, and her character was so, like... And I don't say this in, like, a mean way. Her character was so first D&D character. Like, you look at that character and you're like, this, like, it was this, or it's like, I'm playing a princess as my first D&D character. Like, that trope, like, her character was everything a first D&D character was in the best way. It was so, I don't care if the world is gritty. I don't care about, I'm in pink head to toe, and I'm a badass while I'm in pink from head to toe. And I love it. And it was tropey, and it was all the things it should have been. And at one point, they get this artifact that, if you know the lore of the world, it became really obvious that it was related to the Spider Queen. And all the veteran characters are dancing around it, right? And they're like, ooh, we got this thing, and there's spiders and crawly legs, and you see webs, and ooh, and she's like, do you think it belongs to some kind of spider queen? And you watched all of the veteran players, like, freeze, and, like, look at each other, and then look at Abria, the DM, and then look at each other, because, like, you're not supposed to do that, because the spider queen is the thing, like, but it's also the obvious thing. Of course, a crown that has creepy spiders belongs to a spider queen. So it let them cut out a whole lot of we're trying to play about, we don't want a metagame. Like, not metagaming, it's the obvious answer. And it was such joy for Abria to be like, now that she said that, everyone else, yep, you've heard of the Spider Queen. And she's like, oh my goodness, did I metagame? Did I break the rules? It's like, it's D&D. There's no rules. You didn't know, so you couldn't. I mean, okay, there are rules, but look, David, I'm never wrong.
Fair. But also, we wish we could live in a world where in D&D there were no rules. But that is a great aspect. Like the other side of it is, with a new player, you could use that as an opportunity to rein in some of the, like, loosey-goosey rules that... So, like, let's say you've been playing at a table with veteran players, and as long as you don't have, like, a rules lawyer at the table, some things can just kind of get let go. But then when the new player sits down, you go, okay, so here's how the world works. Here are the rules that here are the lines that you color in. And you'll get a veteran player go, well, this is their first experience, and you could use it as an excuse to sort of rein some of that stuff in, if you are so inclined. And it is a natural, and obviously as, like, the DM, you ultimately are the rules judge, but it is an easy and seamless way to institute that reining in if you are so desiring to do so.
And
and the most important thing about new players, they bring you new snacks.
I have some good snacks from new players, I'm not gonna lie.
But what were you gonna say?
Veteran players can be the biggest killjoy sometimes. You know, sometimes, hey Ezekiel, thanks for hanging out. So yes, for those of you who just joined us, we're talking TTRPGs and new players, and why you want them, and why they're awesome, and what you can do to prep your new player for a game, or what you need to do, or what you can do as a new player getting ready to play in a game for the first time. So tonight, this is serendipitous. This is serendipitous because tonight my favorite TTRPG is airing again after a 2-month, almost 3-month break. Shakar is coming back. Shakar is one of my favorite games. David has listened to me ramble about Shakar forever. It is DM'd by that bronze girl, Jasmine. It has Xander, who was on the G4 stream. It's got Gabe James Games as their druid. And Persephiroth is joining tonight, their 4th character, brand new to the campaign. Very excited. But the other character, the other player in it is Lord Balvin. And Lord Balvin is, he's a streamer. And he's great. And I love him. But this was his first time playing TTRPGs. He'd never played D&D before this. And Bronze just pressured him into joining the group. And so he's playing this kind of grumpy, down on his luck, kind of beaten half-orc character who's doing the best he can with a bad background and a rough start. But he's done a lot of fighting in his past, but hasn't dealt with a lot of magic. So Balvin and his character are in the same space. And at one point, without spoiling too much, they have to they find a dead person and have to resurrect them. They find the skeleton of a person, and have to resurrect this person to try and do a thing. Gonna not spoil anything that I can. And so they get the revivify spell, and they do the whole thing. And then, the person comes back, right? And Balvin is freaking out. And everyone else, including the DM, is like, what's wrong? He's like, this dude, he's got skin. How did he get skin? He was just bones. How did he get... we fought skeletons. I thought it was just going to be a skeleton. I thought we were bringing back a skeleton. That we were going to have, this skeleton that was just going to be, attacking people. But this is a dude. This is a whole... And he had no understanding of the spell that they were using. And it was pure joy. It was one of the greatest moments in the game as this hardened character just can't fathom what they've just done.
This also conjures evil DM in my brain, because resurrections are and should be an incredibly difficult both material time and
Sir, if you resurrect Roxy without skin, we're gonna have a conversation.
So here's the thing: you could have somebody try to resurrect. So there are lots of things that you could do for when the resurrection goes wrong, including you resurrect something that isn't your friend, or it just doesn't work and you accidentally summon a demon or whatever. But you could also do you resurrect and it's just a skeleton, so it's how you gonna put organs back in there? How you gonna give them skin? What's the plan here? And then you have to ask the question of is this a skeletal zombie, or is it a revenant of some sort? Is this a lich now? What's what are you? Are you alive? Are you still and so that could many a campaign has been derailed by we're off on a quest to resurrect this person.
Dear sir, I know you have not watched the end of Critical Role Campaign 2, but you have just poked a raw nerve for so many people, including yours truly, and I'm gonna yell at you about it after, because I'm not spoiling that shiz for other people. But yes, there's lots of ways a resurrection can go wrong. But the focus of this, we've really veered off the last couple, so I'm going to try to keep us at least a little bit on track tonight. Yes, resurrections going wrong, evil DM, mwah, I love it. But also, our focus right now is new players.
Yes, and not what happens when you draw a transmutation circle on the ground because you miss your mom. Aaron in my Strahd game killed an abbot over him using resurrection as a bribery tool.
Wow. Well,
That's smart.
I'm really happy that you're here, Jen, because one of the other things that I was just discussing with David is I actually want to devote another episode to newbies, but I want to bring on Cassandra, who played in our Godplane campaign with Jen, because Cassandra had played like a game or two, like session games that fell apart before they got anywhere. But Godplane was um, Cassandra's first real D&D game that did anything, went anywhere. And Cassandra made some hard decisions. Cassandra
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
multi-classing. She was playing one of the more difficult classes out there, like Artificer Bard. And like she definitely like struggled and we helped her as we could. But yes, Jen was right. She was amazing. You would like mechanics aside, which I've known many veteran players, I have panicked and absolutely messed up. That how many veteran players, how many it's a running joke of like, this is how a bard shoots. This is how, a fighter shoots an arrow. This is how the ranger shoots an arrow. Should use hunter's mark. Like,
Right.
we all mess up mechanics, so that's not necessarily a sign of how veteran a player is. But Cassandra took her stuff for serious. Willie was so amazing. And for those of you who don't know, I'm a little bit of an evil DM sometimes, but I'm an evil narrative DM. And
Right.
I had different parts of different character stories and like tucked them in to lore in different ways. So I had a bunch of information about the god, about other characters that Cassandra's character as a bard knew and was relying on her as part of my storytelling mechanic to bring up these things throughout the course of the game. And she delivered. She absolutely delivered. And she didn't know, and apparently this surprised a lot of people who were watching Godplane. She didn't know that those things were related to the story or that they were related to X character. I just gave her a document full of information dump and was like, if you can work some of this in, do it great. And she was amazing. She was absolutely amazing. And in fact, I don't think she would mind me saying this. By the end of the game, she was telling me like if Willie has to die, Willie has to die. You can kill my character. I'm fine with that. This story has been really good, and Willie's story might be that she dies. And I'm like, Willie's story might be that she dies, but the dice are going to decide that.
Yeah. And that leads to another important point. So like part of this is like us as DMs, how we should foster a welcoming environment for new players. Um, and my first piece of advice is embrace the challenges. More than one person who's played with me, I've said, okay, um, you're new. I'm going to restrict these classes from you playing just because the spellcasting system is a lot of paperwork, and one of the least fun parts of D&D is the paperwork. I remember the absolute first game I played in high school. Our DM sat across from us and said, "Roll up your character, but then roll up 2 backup characters." And we literally spent 2 sessions just making character after character after character, and it's like, well, but why do we need? Oh, because someone's gonna die. And I'm like, maybe that's not like the best. And I went with it and I had a good time. And I did have a character die fairly quickly, and I ended up liking my second character more than my first character. But the I try to wow,
Jen is killing me in chat.
right?
Your emote is on point, lady.
But why I restrict some classes is because as a DM, I sort of keep an eye on people's inventories, people's spells, and the slots that they use, and all this other minutia that is technically the responsibility of the player, but I kind of like to keep track of, because you will run into a wizard who's like, I cast blank at 3rd level, and it's like, how
You're
many
not
3rd level
prepared.
spells
Yeah.
have you had today? Do you have that prepared? Did you have that prepared? And so on and so on and so on.
Well,
And 90% of the time, it's an innocent mistake, but you as a DM need to be mindful of that, especially if you're going to see that and let it go. Where it's like, okay, I'm gonna let this happen. This is fine, because of the storytelling moment that's there.
and I will
But
say, as a new player, my first experience was playing, were we 5th or 8th level druid in Pathfinder,
yeah, 5th.
and having never played ever, but suddenly trying to pick spells, understand which spells I needed. I didn't know what a cantrip was. Like, it was a lot. So I fully believe, like, I will also say, depending on your newbie, also, like, you can treat them differently. I wanted to just sit down and read everything. If someone had just said, like, I needed a little guidance about, like I said, I didn't know what a cantrip was. I didn't understand. They're like, pick a number of spells. We were doing it out of books too, so there was no like D&D Beyond to like help me walk through it. Oh, picking spells. Okay, we should dedicate a whole. That's a request. We're putting it down. Yes, picking spells for new people. Useful spell. I think especially useful cantrips, because there are some cantrips that are incredibly useful, and you might not think they're useful. Min-maxing, picking spells that fit your character. Yeah, because that's great. Wonderful. Thank you. Are you putting that on our list, or do I
Yep.
need? Okay, I wasn't sure if that was a. I'm. Yes, that will be a thing. But yes, playing a spellcaster is very difficult and also really fun because you want to play D&D to either swing a sword or shoot a ball of magic at someone generally. Like, usually you get in and then you're like, oh, well, maybe I want to play a monk. And, like, I'm getting ready to... Or I'm not getting ready. I don't have a place to play this. I'm desperate to play a monk who uses weapons. Like, no spells, just the weapon-using monk. And that's all I want to do right now. But that was certainly not my first pick. My first
Absolutely.
pick was,
No.
I want to be a druid. And then when I finished that, I was like, I want to be a bard or a paladin. And now I finally
Let
moved on to monk.
Let's be real. You always want to go back to rogue.
Okay, look, if you're gonna come at me like that, to be fair, my monk is a ronk. Couple,
Yes.
couple, couple levels in rogue, couple levels in monk. It's gonna be terrible. It's gonna be the worst thing I could do to a DM. I'm really excited. Like for me, I'll make a campaign. Please, please, I will play in a campaign. I need at least some access to the Underdark. That's all I'm gonna say. Um,
Uh,
go.
but the one, so going back to Willie, and Cassandra as a new player, because we were both DMing and I was really behind the scenes, I had her character sheet up and I had her list of spells and I had how many spell slots she had. And so there would be times where she's like, okay, I'm going to do this. And either Kay would know or I would type to her and say, hey, check this out about her. Like she has this prepared, she has this cantrip that might fit the situation. And then you could have this dialogue with her where she ended up doing something that was much cooler
Yeah.
than what she originally envisioned.
And especially on like a streamed campaign, because if you're sitting around the table, like everyone does have a little bit of a soft spot for your new player. If someone is new, you're like, no, 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 I got you. Come on, we got you. Let's figure it out together. What if you do this? On a stream, it's a little bit more like high pressure, and you also there's a fear, especially if the new player is not male identifying. You don't want to be talking down to them. You don't want to be
Right.
leading them by their nose. But you also really do want to lend them the hand and take the time to make sure that they understand their character, their class, what they can do, how they can be awesome and help the party. So we spent some time, like I would go through and be like, because the list of all the artificer things are really cool, but they're not broken down by level. Like it'll be, this is a thing you can do at level 6. This is a thing you can do at level 1. This is a thing you can do at level 3. So of course you go to level 6 first, but you can't do that, because unless you look at the little note, you're not level 6 yet. You're only level 2 in So we broke down, handy lists and then like even made like this is good for strength, these characters are strength based. So that there's too much for everyone to learn all at once, especially with the high pressure of being on a stream. But you also want that fresh energy because Cassandra was just. Willie was very much the heart of that group. Like,
Absolutely.
everyone in that group was amazing. I miss my God Plane crew so much. But Willie was just this little light of, like, I don't understand what's going on, but I'm on an adventure. And it was definitely, like, she didn't look or read initially like she wasn't a first D&D character on the surface, but that like I'm on an adventure was such a first character, a first time playing D&D light that I wouldn't have traded for anything. Oh, thank you, Jen. I hope I made y'all feel empowered and badass, and I just wanted to make you all terrified and then be able to get out of it. um Sorry, David, I interrupted. You were talking more.
But yeah, so being able to keep track of those things for Willie and then insert them has been very helpful. So as a DM with a new player, embrace those challenges. If your character is, or if your player is like, I want to do a dual class like an artificer and a wizard, and just wants to do all this like crazy complicated, just go with it. And it does a couple of things. One, it adds to um, the fullness of your experience and gives you tools that you could use later with other people. And it helps you figure out shortcuts and ways to trim down the paperwork of D&D and other tabletop systems. Because I found that when I was playing Pathfinder, there was especially with character creation, there was so much more paperwork to it than with Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, so that I spent a lot of time talking to our DM and talking to another friend of mine who DMs a bunch of Pathfinder games about all the little things that they do to sort of like trim that down and make that easier. And so you can never know too much mechanically as a DM. Like even someone like Matt Mercer, who's been playing for years and years and years, doesn't know everything off the top of his head.
He's constantly consulting the book. And it's great.
But, a couple of years ago, I didn't know how many, or what were the dice in a healing potion or a greater healing potion, or I didn't know what the dice were for like all the weapons. And now there are all these things that I don't have to stop and Google, because I could just go, a dagger's 1d4, a longsword's 1d6, or no, a short sword's 1d6, and a longsword's 1d8. And helping new players and helping them with the character building process and helping them with the mechanics helps to instill those tools into your brain to make you a better DM.
And also, number one, guiding new players is a great way to make sure you know your stuff, but also you can inform while also teaching. So like instead of just, new player question, your longsword does 8 damage. I'm pretty sure your longsword does 1d8 damage plus your modifier. Check on your page, this is where you find it. And that kind of teaches them, because that's part of the problem with D&D is like there's so much to know, and it feels like people are pulling this out of the air, so they don't necessarily know where to go to reference it. So the more you can tell them, like, okay, I think because you're a gnome, you have advantage on these saves. Or I think because you are an elf, you have advantage on charm. Check under a da-da-da. And that trains not just your newbies, but your veteran players who have maybe gotten lazy to go look at their stuff.
And that's absolutely another advantage of new players is so that's the other thing is you could rope your other players into helping. And if you're playing with the right people and you put together the right table, then everybody's going to be eager to help one another. And one of the first things I say whenever I'm running a new group is, regardless of where you come from, your ideological differences, etc., we're approaching this from you are all in this together.
Mhm.
And it stops the sort of like edgelord, well, you have to convince me to go along and do this thing. And it's like, okay, well, we don't, bye-bye.
Mhm. Do you want to come
And
along?
then
You
you
better
move on.
find a reason. Like, it
Right,
is my job as a DM to find the plot hooks to keep you engaged and interested. I can't do that if A, you don't communicate, and if B, you don't give me a reason. It's not my job to, like, force your character against their will to do this. If you want your character to be brought on against your will, against their will, great! Tell me that. We can work that out together, but I need you. It's not my job to convince you and your character.
right.
Players who just want to play the game. Yes. Some players want to play a single player RPG. And that's cool, but they need to go play a single player RPG,
Yeah, I mean,
not
like,
a D&D game.
BioWare has many options for you to select from. Um, but the best thing about new players, I think, besides the snacks are the best thing, is um, it's an opportunity to grow the community. For
Mhm.
every because most of the people that I know who play today, they play because their boyfriend dragged them to play, their girlfriend dragged them to play, um, or there are conversations like, well, where were you Sunday afternoon when we were supposed to be doing blah? It's like, oh, I had my D&D game. Oh, well, what happened in your D&D game? Like, I I spend more time recounting the tales of what happened in my D&D games to others than I do working on the D&D game. And I've put some time into working on my game, but so many people like just talking about what happened and what character, and it's all about what the characters did
Mhm.
and how funny and cool and interesting the characters are,
I don't know
and
what you're
it's
talking about.
way
Roxy has
less.
never done anything funny or unexpected in
Right.
her
And
life.
like, like I've got Roxy stories and I've got Nye stories and I've got Felice
Vida.
stories and I've got V. I show um in our game, there was this whole stretch where the running joke is, can you talk to spiders? And before the paladin in our game woke up and realized that she could speak with animals, um the dwarf fighter was like, the intelligence is a 6. They can understand like pictograms and stuff. They can't speak language. So I'm gonna make a big old banner.
And
And
hang
so
it off the convoy.
this man, while we're playing, draws in MS Paint the banner slash flag thing. And I have shown that picture to more people than I have shown pictures of myself to other people. Um, and so you want to grow your community, and the only way, or the best way to make more DMs is to make more players.
Mhm.
And so
No
you
one
get
joins
someone new
D&D
in,
going, I want to be a DM.
right?
Everyone joins D&D being, I want to be a player, and then it becomes, I can do this better than the person who's probably doesn't want to be a DM, who's running the game and are only a DM because no one else will be the DM. Or it becomes, oh, I really like telling stories, and if I tell a story, my friends will really like it, and I guess I'm going to be a forever DM now.
Right. Um, but yeah, everybody comes to it not because they saw a Dungeons and Dragons book in a store, picked it up, bought it, and then went, "Oh man, I want to play." Everyone has an encounter with someone who's played it, and so if you bring in a new player and give them a great experience, not only do you have a dedicated player to your pool, like Kay has the problem of she has too many people who want to play with her. She does not have enough hours in the day to play with everyone that she wants to play with all at once. Um, but you know, that person then goes out and goes, hey, D&D is great, I did these things, and then other people get interested, and then you and other DMs and other people and, like, you know, tabletop stores, all of a sudden you have this whole network of people who are now playing a game based off of a good interaction they had with you.
Yep.
Because all the old veteran players, like anyone who's been playing since like Stranger Things really led the resurgence, unfortunately, of D&D into the zeitgeist of our culture. Anyone who played before that, seriously, like, you know, multiple DMs, played Adventures Guild, everybody has a tale of a nightmare DM. Everybody has a tale of a nightmare DM and a nightmare player, sometimes at the same table. But the more we can reduce the amount of nightmare DMs and help form great new players and help form great new experiences, the better it will be for the community overall, and the better it will be for our individual experiences.
I had another point, and then I got so invested in what you were saying that it just, like, grew little wings and flew away. But I'm sure it will come back to me.
Mark that down. I made a good point. I will put that in the history books. There's a first time for everything.
I'll give you this one.
Right.
I know what I was going to say. Don't be afraid. So many new players, and I know I kind of fell into this, and I think our next section we're going to talk about if you are a new player, or if you are getting ready to bring in a new player, how to prepare them for their first session, depending on how much research and work they want to do. But don't be afraid to encourage them to be a kind of character who wouldn't know everything about the world that your game is set in. Don't be afraid to tell them, like, not everyone has to be a grizzled veteran coming in. David knows, I've discussed this. One of these days I'm going to sit down and write it. Much to my shame, I've not done it yet. But I have an intro module that is literally designed for one person who's never played before to kind of be a central character to introduce them to the world, along with another character or two who know the world, and then one who maybe has played a couple times, if you want to throw that in. That literally the job of the person who's new is to not know anything, is to explain the world as they know it, which is not the world of D&D. And so the players can together come to an understanding of what all this is, and they get an adventure that will eventually drop them in the Forgotten Realms. So encourage your character can be a noble who's maybe been cooped up in the castle and doesn't know much about the world. Your character can be a farmer. Your character can be someone who just didn't want to go on an adventure and got dumped here somewhere. Your character could have just been summoned by a god. Like, don't be afraid to tell your players, if you are not sure, if you are insecure of, I don't know the lore, I don't know these spells, I don't know this stuff, that's okay. You can build that into your character so you're not having to pretend to know everything. If you want to try to know everything, cool, absolutely do that. But if that's something that's keeping you from playing, if that's something you're insecure about, you can write around it. My characters always have aloofness built in. Oh, my ADHD. I don't know what yeah. So don't be afraid to tell your players. They don't have to know that. And that is really something that I struggled with when I was first trying to get into D&D. I was so afraid. I think especially, even though I was coming into a safe group, I was coming in to a safe group with people whom I know and like and trust, and people who I knew that they know that I'm a little bit creative and intelligent, at least a little bit. But I was... Oh. Go.
I'm sorry. I saw you could play an isekai if you want. Listen. If you are a DM, if you are a player, if you are a person who wants to do that, that is great. It's never happened at my table. It's just ooh-wee. Anyway, continue.
For those who don't know, David, give a quick rundown, because we are talking about newbies here, so let's be inclusive.
So, isekai is a type of anime where it is I fell into a video game world. But it is a world not like your own, and you are when you fall into this world, in some cases the main character has no idea of how it works. In some cases, they know like all the systems, except the realness of it has an impact. But the point is you go from the world that we are in now
Mhm.
into a completely different, usually fantasy-based world, where you don't know, like, they don't know how to start a fire, they don't know how to actually hold a sword, they don't know. And over the course of the anime, they figure all this stuff out. There are some laughs that are had. There's usually like some incelish romance, and then they end up beating the big bad. I have a lot of problems with this type of anime, and we're not good. That's not the point of this right now. Um, but interestingly, as a um, as a tabletop D&D concept, it's great. And in fact, um, one of the best tabletop ideas I've ever heard is a friend of mine ran a group for like 5-6 years that ended at level 20, beat the big bad. They had their own keeps. They were friends with the royalty, and there was just nowhere for them to go. And so they sat around thinking for a long time. Well, we're max level. We have everything we want. And he's like, okay, the king summons you to go and close this portal, and they go and they do some things to try and close it, and then the portal explodes, and then they all wake up in a world they've never been to, and there's flying cars and metal and and they're like, wait a second. And then he brings out an entire new system set in the future and slaps like the 3 source books on the table and is like, make your characters. And they all went from level 20 to level 1 in this new world because they don't know what a microchip is, they don't know how to hack, they don't know what guns are or how they work. And it was a really cool way for them to keep all of their characters
Mhm.
and end up in a new world and a new system.
It's really neat. Um, but yeah, one thing I would say is going back to before I derailed us on that. I was so afraid that I was going to be at the table, the one person who didn't know the rules, who didn't know how to do the dice, who was going to fuck up the math, who was just going to sit there in a panic and ruin the experience for everyone else. That was literally my fear, and I was afraid I was going to be the girl who destroyed a D&D game for everyone. And so I was
Oof.
trying it was really a fear of mine. Hi, I have imposter syndrome about everything. Uh, um, and yes, your dice rolls, you do enough damage to yourself and to other characters. But that's for Sunday. Um, yes, or to others. Um, so I tried to dig through the Pathfinder book, just raw dog it, and it was not effective. I felt like I was trying, it was worse than trying to do a research paper in college, right? Like I felt like it was like that I at 4 in the morning in the library digging through some encyclopedia source book. My brain was tired, my eyes were gritty. I was just getting nowhere. Um, and I did fine at the table, and I was really afraid, I wanted to do some fun things, but, I knew there were, classes and rules, and I was so afraid of, what if I ask, and it was like, okay, tieflings have horns and tails, and, humans don't, and half-elves have, pointy ears, and I'm, terrified to ask my friend who's DMing, I'm terrified to ask him, I'm like, can I just say, you can't see them yet, but my character has really small horns under his hair? I was terrified to ask this because I was so afraid of breaking the rules of D&D. Which is part of why that's why I generally tell players and say to new people, there's not rules. Yes, there are rules, but we can get around the rules. If you've got a cool idea, if you've got something to do, we can get around the rules. And again, yes, I have a lot of source books. I have read not quite everything on this shelf, but I've read
Most of it.
yeah.
Way more than your average nerd.
Yeah. But that's not how I learned D&D. I learned D&D because I sat down and I started watching Critical Role and Silver and Steel and Shikar and Dimension 20. And that's really that's my encouragement to new players. If you are trying to get into D&D, if you are excited to play your first game or your first campaign, on stream or off stream, at the table, whatever, worry less about, I have to know everything there is to know about my character. I have to know the mechanics. Mechanics can be taught. Yes, you need to build your character sheet and pay attention to your character sheet. But the thing that that's not that disruptive. The thing that is disruptive, the real problem, is if you don't know how to be at the table. If you have main character syndrome, if you just don't give anyone else a chance to play, no one cares if you ask a dumb question or if you say, I want to try to blind the thing. The problem becomes when you don't know how to interact the table, and a lot of that comes from nerves or not knowing what to expect. So really the best thing you can do, and I don't care which stream you watch. Watch Rivals of Waterdeep. It's amazing. Watch Black Dice Society. It's terrifying and some of the best acting you'll see. A lot of people get upset when I say, yes, Critical Role is a great example. Your table's not going to be Critical Role. I understand when people talk about the Mercer effect. I've apparently been blamed for a K effect already. Critical Role, yes, Matt Mercer is an excellent DM. Matt Mercer is an excellent DM because his players are also phenomenal. And your table is only going to be as good as everyone at it, and that includes you. So sit down, watch what a game looks like. You don't have to watch Critical Role. Watch Silver and Steel. Silver and Steel is great. Watch Shikar. It's a smaller group. You don't have to keep track of as many people. But watch some of these games. Watch how games play. Watch how people interact. When do you roll initiative? What is combat? When you watch it, it's so much easier to absorb. Hey, Todd! And then, as you're absorbing it, you will also learn mechanics. I hit the pandemic. I watched all of Critical Role. I watched every single episode Critical Role had ever put out to that point. And then I went and found one-shots. And then I was watching Silver and Steel and Rivals of Waterdeep, and I watched every D&D thing I could get because that was how I was coping with the isolation of the pandemic. And the next thing I knew, my DM is like, what's the rules on that? Hey Kay, do you know the rule about that? Hey Kay, how does this work? Because I had just absorbed it from watching other people play it. Yes, watch Dead Planet. Absolutely watch Dead Planet. Watch God Plane. Watch iToaster. coming Friday.
Right. And yeah, as a DM and as Kay's DM, I have absolutely used her as like a quick lookup. It's like I could Google this, or Kay has the answer right there. So Kay, what is the answer here?
Yeah. Like, hey Kay, what's that rogue move? Like, I've become the rogue person. What's that rogue move? Yep. Okay.
Yep.
Hey Kay, how does hiding work?
Happen here?
Yeah.
Or here. And so branching outside of like strict D&D, Pathfinder, etc. And I'm not an expert on tabletop, so where the line between like board games like Scrabble and Monopoly stops and like tabletop gaming and you get into like your more esoteric custom-made games like starts is not a discussion that I am in any way an expert for. But when it comes to video games and those types of tabletop games, there is this progression of expertise where you are a beginner and you're just trying to figure out the mechanics, and then you're sort of intermediate whereby all the mechanics are comfortable and you're having a great time, and then you are master level whereby the only thing that you are working on is refining your game theory. And having learned Munchkin and learned the one horror game that we played, which
House
was a blast.
on Haunted Hill? House on
Haunted Hill.
I love
And
that game. I'm not a big board game fan. I can play them. They don't really do it for me. But we played House on Haunted Hill like a D&D game.
yep,
Like, oh my god,
I
at
will
one
own a
time
copy
they
of this
made
game.
me. Oh my god, at one time they told me I had to be like the prom queen. So I did the entire game like this and I ended up like being the killer and oh my god, I like killed them all. And
We're not going
it
to
was a
talk about how Kay was a priest at one point.
yeah,
that
we don't
was
talk
bad.
about that one.
But there is this moment, both when I play these games and when I'm one of the veterans who's played these games, and I'm um, watching other new players, where the mechanics all click, and then they get into the flow of the game, but they're not at the point whereby they're trying to execute the like top end masterful strategy. And it's just this flow of like, it clicks, they're having fun, they don't have to stop and like second guess what they're doing. And that sweet spot of the new player experience is such a satisfying thing to be a part of,
Hmm.
um, both as the newbie and as the veteran. um, that to me, that's what makes these like board game meetups um, so engaging. Is, you show up and there's 6 7 people, one person has played this game or no one has played this game, and then you spend a couple hours figuring it out, and by the end you're having this great time.
Hmm.
um, and it can't be discounted how the again the new player experience brings a lot to everyone's experience and adds a lot to the cohesiveness of it.
And that's part of the joy too of having a new player on stream, right? Because yes, it can disrupt the flow as you have to talk mechanics, but that moment when that player is like, wait, wait, no, if I use this spell, can I do that? And you're like, yes. And they had that moment of connecting with their character, their class. They knew the rules. They weighed the risks. They can do this thing. And especially when the dice are on their side, oh, it's so rewarding. Just watch them be like, I did that. No one told me. I came up with it myself. Like having that moment of joy captured, like it every one of us, I think it brings us back to that first time for us when we did the thing. And it was amazing. And
And
it's
that
ambrosia.
that especially happened in Godplay. There were a couple of moments where where Cassandra was like, "Wait, I can do this, right?" And we're like, "Yes, you can do that." And then she's like, "Wait, okay, so I do this, this, and this." Great, and it ended up being this huge, not just like this huge, impactful, like mechanically efficient thing that she did in a fight or otherwise, but it also became a big character set piece for the
Hmm.
character.
Hmm.
um and you can't build those things, you can't force those things. They just happen, and when they do happen, it's really incredible.
I will also say, new players, welcome to whatever system your friends are wanting to play. Uh, Dive into it. Don't feel like you have to only play D&D or you only have to play Pathfinder. You only have to play Kids on Bikes. There are a ton of really, really, really cool systems out there. Some of them are much more role play and improv heavy. Some of them are much more, we call that creamy. Some of them are much more crunchy in that there's a lot of math, there's a lot of dice. You have to roll to do a bunch of stuff. If you watch my games, I play 5e, Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition, but I play it a little more creamy a lot of the time than it needs to be, especially outside of combat. Um, but you don't have to play 5e. Dungeons and Dragons is great. It's easy. There's a huge community that knows it's not necessarily easy. Once you've got the basics down, it's pretty easy, but it can take a while to get the basics. But there's a ton of other amazing systems, and some of them are like dice pool related. If you watch Misfits, Magic and Misfits, it's a Harry Potter inspired game which Abria runs, which is a dice pool system. I don't understand dice pool systems. They stress me out. To me, that is more math because but I've now played a dice pool system and I know it's not for me. Will I play one again? Sure, if it's if it's with the right DM who knows that I will panic at having to add a large number of numbers constantly and decide what. But there's lots of different systems, and they're not all 5e, and they're not all super creamy, they're not all super crunchy, and find a game that will fit your playstyle. I like roleplay and improv. I love doing weird character stuff. I love trying to figure out what's my fellow player thinking and help them get that character moment out and draw them into a story. But a lot of people find that kind of impromptu roleplay really uncomfortable. It's great for streams, but some people, maybe you just want to math it. Maybe you just want to go full murder hobo, and you just want to go in like, you want my goal, I have a character, I have a weapon, I want to hit as many bad guys with the weapon as I can. Well, what's your character motivation? Whatever it has to be to move the plot forward. I don't know. You tell me what we're doing because I just want to go punch something in the face. That is a completely legitimate playstyle. And there are systems and DMs out there who will do that. So if you find there's a part of the game that you really dislike, go find a system that doesn't have that part. Or a DM that will downplay it.
And in discussions that I've read, and even some conversations I've had, there's been a lot of slander on more crunchy systems. But the more I play D&D, the more you have this perfect storm that happens, where, and Kay and I have said this over and over again, where the dice tell a story. If you have a character that's charisma is, in the mid-range or even high, but is absolutely bad with like courting courting romantic interests, that you'll roll great in everything else, but in this one aspect you'll always roll terrible, and that informs a character aspect that you get to fold into their personalities.
And I'm going to take it real quick, right back around, continuing that story. That was totally my Paladin of the Flying Spaghetti Monster he was talking about.
Absolutely.
Without giving too much away, on Todd Moonbounce's channel, I play Mothership, where I play an android who wants to protect their people. And, their motivation, like, the dice were like, oh, your main motivation is keep your people safe. Cool. The dice have definitely told a story over the last 3 episodes. Thank you, dice. Really, thank you, dice.
Some people, like I've talked to people who are interested, and for some people, the intimidating part is not the mechanics of it. The intimidating part is the character aspect of it. Because they're like, I'm a boring person. I'm only going to come up with boring people. And I'm like, that's not so. Like, I wouldn't be standing here talking to you if you were a boring person. I would put you into the garbage where you belong.
Mm-hmm.
But you could then say to this, you could then say to those people, okay, well, we're going to set you up with these things, and then as you roll, the rolls that you make will shape your character, and that takes more pressure off of you. And so you get a crunchier system that imposes more of those restrictions, and it makes it easier to color inside the lines for those people. And like Todd said, other systems definitely, like every system has its advantages and disadvantages. And Kay and I are going to do a whole stream about like things in 5e that probably need to be touched up a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
But more than one person I've talked to has lifted an entire system, or an entire like mechanic in a system and put it in another system because that game was missing it, or was doing it poorly.
Crits, like, even from was it 4th edition or was it 3.5? In 5e, crits actually don't do anything outside of combat. There is no such thing as a critical fail or a critical success in 5e outside of combat. You know what? No. Right. If you play with me, you roll that nat 20, you're getting a critical success. I don't know what's going to happen, but something... And again, with me, a nat 1 isn't necessarily that you're trying to talk to someone. You're not going to suddenly just, like, vomit on their shoes. But something unexpected is going to happen. Something chaotic, unexpected is going to happen. Why? Because dice, if we're saying that the dice matter, then the dice have to matter.
A good example of that is exploding dice.
Oh, I love exploding dice. That was my next rant. I love exploding dice.
Right, like not in the game we currently play, but there definitely been games where it's like our crit system is not the 5e crit system, it is the exploding dice system. Go nuts. And you end up with, one would argue, more larger, more complex cinematic moments because of the substitution of the crit system.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's a lot of and of course we can do a whole episode on here's why you play more systems than just 5e. But
I'm gonna have to drag some experts in for that one.
Yes, absolutely.
It's gonna be a fun talk because even Jen just mentioned in the chat Fallout. There's a Fallout RPG table D20 system, and oh my goodness, I didn't actually know this. And now I do.
There are a couple of video game worlds that have released systems. Some of them better than others, but I've been curious to dive into them, and I haven't managed that yet.
So, chat, you've been amazing. Any questions you have about being a new player or preparing a new player or anything like that? David, any final comments you have? Because we are probably going to start winding this down for tonight. But you all have been amazing. Like, I know, like, I put up the Twitter poll asking, like, what should we talk about? And this was what everyone wanted to hear about. And again, I love having, I don't want to run a game where I don't have someone newish to D&D on stream. Like, oh, that was the other point I was going to make, that I forgot. One advantage to having new players, I still have cat hair on me. One of the big advantages to having a new player on a stream is it makes it so much more accessible to the viewer who may or may not have the same level of expertise. If you, like, and again, it's on stream, so you're not spending a whole lot of time like breaking stuff down, but it's all like, roll this. Okay, so that is going to be, a d20 plus your perception. Hey, by the way, basically always roll a d20. Unless we say roll something else, if we just say roll me a this, roll a d20 and you add a modifier. And just throwing that out on stream is so welcoming and so inviting and so informative for the viewer who may or may not be super familiar with the system. So it's so useful to have that. It's so great. Personally, I don't think it breaks immersion at all, especially if the new player is struggling. Like, that is so useful. It's welcoming, it's educating, and it's gonna keep the hobby alive and growing. And that's what we all want, is hobby to be alive and to grow.
And the other thing is the vocabulary and the vernacular of the game can become really insular if you don't have explanations for it occasionally. Like, I think this happened in Exandria Unlimited, where somebody rolled a dirty 20, and then Amy was like, what does that mean? What? And then Abria was like, oh, this is what... And so that means that everybody watching the stream from now until the end of time, when, Travis rolls a dirty 20 on Critical Role, or you see it anywhere else, they'll go, oh, that's a 20, that's not a critical 20, it's the numbers add up to 20. And that helps bring in people into not just the experience, but also to get associated with the vocabulary and lingo and everything, so that, as they move forward, they can feel more included in the experience.
Mm-hmm. And then they can go to their table and being like, roll their dice and go, that's a dirty 20.
Right.
And then this is one thing, and I'm going to quick sidebar us into, like, okay, I'm a community manager. I've spent a lot of time dealing with fandom, and there's really interesting inclusive languages that happen everywhere. And one of those things that show I belong, one of my favorite examples is My Little Pony. In the My Little Pony fandom, if you're anywhere in the world and you see someone and you think they might be into ponies, but you're not sure, but you want to be sure, all you have to do is find some excuse to say, that could be 20% cooler, or that's 20% cooler, you look 20% cooler. 20% cooler, if you say that, anyone who knows My Little Pony knows that you're in on it. And so you have these terms, and every group has these. Critical Role, is it Thursday yet?
Yeah, absolutely.
We know, right? Every fandom has these little things, and it's a way, for people to identify that I'm part of it, but it's also a way for newbies who are uncomfortable in the space, who are afraid, who are new, who are nervous, to say, I belong. I'm one of you. I'm learning, but I know a basic thing. And that is so important to developing that community. So, teachy, not preachy, right? Celebrate things, explain the lingo, and celebrate it when they get it right. And make sure that it's not like, oh, did your brother teach you that? Because no.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely not.
So yes, that is, I think, our show for today. Thank you so much for hanging out, Jen. Thank you for hanging, it's such a treat every Tuesday to come and talk about tabletop games and see who shows up and chat with you all. I hope, to an extent, I feel like I'm kind of preaching to the choir at this group, but also, I've learned a lot just talking and thinking through some of this and how we're going to put this together. And so I hope you are both learning and being entertained, and thank you so much for spending time with us, because it means a lot.
Definitely thank you for hanging out with us, and also I hope you are inspired to take things to your own games and disseminate them. Because ultimately what we are doing, what we are about, is growing the community and making it a good experience for everyone.
So unfortunately, it looks like Shakar is not live yet, but tonight on that Bronze Girls' channel, please check out Shakar. It should be going live, I believe, by 8 o'clock. It is the first episode of the second season, which means the whole first episode with a new character, so it's all going to be basically intro, so that's awesome. It's the tail end of Black Dice Society, so I'm not going to raid you over at the end of a horror campaign, or the end of a episode of a horror game. That doesn't make sense. So we're going to raid you over to retro, because we love retro. But
we love retro.
Before we do that, let me say again, hi, I'm Kay. I've been your host for the show. Thank you again for hanging out. You can find me everywhere, Twitch, Twitter, and TikTok at KDamnFear. I write about things on Gaming Trend. I stream here Pokemon on Mondays, Tuesday D&D Right Now Talk Show, and we will also be interjecting this with little blips of actual plays when we get them together. You can find me Sundays over at Todd Moonbounce's channel playing Kai in Dead Planet. And you can find me not this Friday, but next Friday on Todd's channel playing Brave Little Toaster. And I'm very excited about that. Someone else, I think, has already claimed an espresso machine, so I'm going to have to, get creative.
Yeah, I'm angry that you've got me thinking about this now. But I am David Lee. You can find me at Full Rubber Ducky on Twitter and Twitch. Please join Kay's Discord, because I hang out there as well. Also, check out replays of our discussions and later our games on Kay's YouTube channel. And definitely look forward in the coming weeks for stuff that Kay and I are working to start coming out.
Thank you to Web Captioner for our captions, our amazing live captions, and thank you to Bardly.io for the music that you're hearing chillin'. And I think that's all we've got. Do we have anything else? I feel like there's something. I'm sure we forgot something. But thank you for watching. Thank you for your questions. If you have topics you would like for us to cover, please share. Let us know. We would love to talk about them. If you are interested in playing a game, we have several actual plays that we're casting for. Hop into my Discord. We would love to see you there. And we are going to raid you over to Retro. Please say hi, and I'm going to go eat some beef stew. So I will see you next time. Bye, y'all.